Nigeria has been on a slow and fragile growth path. With its vast potential, Nigeria can become a magnet for global investments. But persistent challenges like corruption, inconsistent policies, and infrastructural deficits have deterred potential investors. By actively addressing these issues and creating a stable and investor-friendly environment, Nigeria can unlock its true economic potential. Plenary 2, FDI Ready, Delivering Investor Confidence. This plenary is interpreted for our virtual audience in Pidgin, Hausa, Igbo, French, and Yoruba. Follow the on-screen instructions to gain access. Welcome to this plenary session.
It's not sound. Okay, that's it. Good afternoon, everyone. I believe you can now hear me. Welcome to this second plenary panel talking about FDI, being investor ready, restoring investor confidence. In the first instance, can we just confirm that our panelists are on? If they could be projected virtually, so at least we can see them. But whilst we do that, the ones who are here physically have been introduced. Oh, hello. Hi, welcome. Thank you. You can hear me okay? Yes, okay, good. The two other panelists we're expecting to be joining virtually. So as soon as you can, please, the tech team, if you can project them so we know who's who and who's on. So we're going to get straight in. You know who all the panelists are, and we will start with Dr. Jumoke, as she's fondly referred to. And the question, actually, Jumoke, is the title of this plenary, FDI's Restoring Investor Confidence. What does that mean to you?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. FDI, really, just restoring investor confidence, to me, it means making sure that the business climate is comfortable for every business operating in Nigeria. I think that the best way to restore foreign investor interest is to make sure that the businesses actually operating in Nigeria have a very strong, robust, and they're confident of their doing business in Nigeria. They're really the best testimonial that we have for attracting FDI. So that's my job, to try and make it a progressively easier place to do business.
Thank you. So if you look at the theme for this summit, it's about sustainable economic transformation, and we all know that to achieve that, there's the tripod that you require of skills, infrastructure, and capital. So this whole question of FDI being one important capital flow is absolutely critical for us to achieve what we're talking about. But of course, as we all know, over the last decade or so, the actual capital flows into Nigeria has decreased significantly. So Jumoke has told us her perspective of what it means, but I'd like to come to you, Bolaji. Obviously, private sector, what your perspective is about what that term means.
Sure. I think first and foremost, to attract international capital, 3-4 things that are quite important. The first of those, clearly is local investors must be investing here. I think that's quite fundamental. The second is that the plumbing works, and the plumbing very simply is all of those issues which Jumoke is dealing with around ease of doing business. But perhaps the most important of the elements of the plumbing is infrastructure. And investors don't like to come and build infrastructure. They like to invest on a platform of infrastructure. and accelerating our investments into infrastructure are important. But last but by no means least is delivering a return. And the market opportunity affords that, but without price stability, it's really, really difficult to get a good investment return.
Okay, thank you. And that leads me nicely to my next question. One thing I'm always talking about, Nigeria, obviously, large market, there's no question. But we often forget about this whole concept of competition for capital. That capital will not just come to Nigeria because it is large, but capital is looking at where it's getting its highest risk-adjusted returns. So Emily, I'm going to come to you, and I'd just like you to talk a bit more about this whole concept of competition for capital. I thought you were well placed given your position with APTA. You have a broad-based perspective. I'm hoping you're still there because I can't see you. Emily?
Yes, I'm still here. Okay. So thank you very much. And it's unfortunate that I was not able to be with you there today. We were just coming back from the World Investment Forum. And so it became difficult to get the visa and come to Nigeria or Abuja for that case in time for the meeting. And of course, then brings me back to the fact that then that is also an issue that we need to also look at in Africa, the issue of requiring visas to go everywhere. And so just even getting into your question about the competitiveness, of course, for every region and every country, you have to be competitive to attract investors, and in this case, foreign direct investors. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I had as if someone stopped me. Anyway, so what I wanted to say that for the case of Nigeria, you have an advantage always, and you are a big market. So for sure that that gives you a bit more advantage than the smaller countries or the smaller markets. You also have, let's say, the young population who are very well educated. As the rest of us in Africa, I come from Kenya, we say that an average Nigerian at least has a first degree and a master's. Now, that already gives you skilled workers. So that gives you a bit of an advantage in this case to be able then to attract investors and to retain investors. But I also have to agree the issue of infrastructure development is also important. And those are some of the areas where then government needs to put in more effort to become more competitive, especially as we move towards the implementation of the AFCFTA. But the way I look at it, countries like Nigeria will actually be the ones also being investors in the other countries. And that's why a protocol like the one we have developed under the AFCFTA becomes important. I think I'll stop there for now so that I give room to the other colleagues and panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. Ike, let me come to you. What are your thoughts? I know you're speaking to investors all the time. So at the risk of having to repeat what maybe Bolaji and Emily have said, what further insights do you want to add?
Thank you for that. I think presently for investors looking to come into Nigeria, the biggest issues on their mind is price and FX stability. I was here this morning when the president spoke. It was very reassuring. And the Minister of Finance gave some hints of what's to come. But in the present circumstance, price and foreign exchange stability is a big elephant that we need to resolve. Clearly, if you're investing in dollars at a particular rate and you don't know what rate you're going to get out of, or if you're going to find the liquidity to exit, that's a big challenge. Plus, of course, once you've converted into Naira, you then find all the other issues. Insecurity is the second biggest problem. If we cannot get around our country safely, then it's not possible to attract foreign investment, talk less of the domestic investors. And last, out of the top three, I think, will be all the sort of issues around doing business. It's sort of all wrapped around ease of doing business, but I consider them to be the poor implementation of all the rules we have. Nigeria has a lot of laws that guide you in many things, and very well written in quite a number of cases. But when you actually come to the practice of how they are implemented, you then find that they are sort of trampling all over themselves, and the result is a very frustrating exercise for investors indeed. I would like to stop there for now.
Okay, thank you. Is Minister Tuggar on the line? He was meant to be on. Yes, no, perhaps? No, all right, we'll keep it moving. Jumoke, I'm going to come back to you. You've been doing, so you're essentially Madam Ease of Doing Business, and Ike obviously just spoke about the need to address that. I'm going to later ask you, and I know you've got to leave at 2:30. Thank you for accommodating the fact that we overran. But before we talk about the initiatives that you have in mind, over the last 8 years, what has surprised you the most in your role?
Good surprise or not so good surprise?
The lot, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Okay. I think the good surprise is that you continue to have reform-minded public and civil servants that are willing to put in the hard work. They may not always be in the majority. I'm glad that one is right here. Simbi is right here. His agency is consistently a high achiever. We ranked the EO1 report, and I was telling him that we're releasing another one today, which is why I have to leave. But you consistently have bright spots of reform-minded people who get it and prioritize the work. The not so pleasant surprise is the way sometimes the system lags on consequence management. So in private sector, there's elasticity, and the consequence management bites and hits. So with public sector, it takes longer, which is why we try to track things, name and shame, encourage where it's good. So I think that the fact that we still dance around consequence management was probably the biggest surprise in view of the issues at hand and the political will. But the system is structured such that it's very, very difficult to really have what I need at the job.
So what do you need, and what would you require?
Well, I think that you heard Mr. President. He has consistently spoken about investment, about the economy. It's his top priority. He doesn't suffer fools gladly. He's taking responsibility. He's leading from the front. So I can't see a situation where an agency head or higher or lower is going to frustrate a particular reform initiative or a particular reform effort. Willology was talking about infrastructure. We talked about the whole gamut of what we need to do, but like Ike was saying, the rudimentary implementation, the boots on the ground, our ports reform, the people challenges, the processes, and then infrastructure, of course, use of automation, blocking rent-seeking opportunities, and the granular everyday work to make sure that the system works. That is what needs to be done and followed through, because you're talking about targets, FDI targets, and policy coordination, and that's all really needed and will be done and has already commenced. But the day-to-day work is where the rubber meets the road. That's what will deliver the results, and in a sustainable manner.
Thank you. I'm not going to keep peppering you because it's not a single-person panel, but Bolaji has been smiling and nodding. So,
a lot of that.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that there are 3-4 simple ways that you know whether a country is really ready for foreign investment and to ramp up foreign investment. One of the first tests always is airports. It sounds very, very simple, but when you land at an airport as an investor, and I spent 30 years talking to investors every day, it tells you so much about a country's readiness, to do business. And airports are fairly easy to build. They're simply high-security shopping malls. And it's so difficult to understand how for a country that's so keen on foreign investment, solving that issue, we still haven't cracked. And the way to do it, quite frankly, is concessioning those things properly, yeah, and getting real private capital to come and deal with it. The second issue that you look at always is 4 elements of infrastructure: transportation networks, electricity, digital networks, and then the base load for electricity, which in our case, we have an incredible blessing, not only of gas, but all of these, renewable type materials. And an investor wants to come here and build a food processing factory. He doesn't want to turn up and be responsible for power, responsible for building, transportation, logistics infrastructure. That's not their business, and that's non-core. And I give you the example of when we founded the mobile networks here. It's a miracle that mobile technology has done as well as it has done in Nigeria. Because when those licenses were paid for, everybody anticipated building a mobile network. You didn't plan for building a transmission network or building a power network. And all of these things, without dealing with them, it's really, really difficult for us to scale investments. So recognizing that foreign direct investments aren't going to rush in through the door, we then have to think about how we deepen and build significant domestic investing in the economy.
Emily? Again, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So we're here, a group of Nigerians, and we're talking about Nigeria, and we're talking about issues that we've all known for decades. And if I could hazard a guess, I'm sure that on the first ever NESG some 29 years ago, we were talking about some of these issues. You're laughing, Emily, don't laugh at us. What do you see? Where do you think we're going wrong, so to speak? And just let you know, this thing, for this conversation to be of value to anyone, we've got to have open, honest conversations, right? So tell us, what do you think, okay, now let me rephrase it to be more positive. What do you think we could be doing differently to achieve the outcomes that we desire?
Okay. Thank you. I'm not laughing at you by any chance. Because you're sitting in Nigeria, you may think it's only Nigeria that is facing those problems. Those problems are common in nearly all African countries. And that's why we at AFCFTA, it has become necessary to see how do we assist countries to actually harmonize their laws and regulations to make it easier for cross-border trade. Now, as has been mentioned by the panelists who just spoke before me, we have to build the infrastructure. And I think there are no two ways about it. And infrastructure is really the role of government, if you may call it that way. And so government, yes, can actually get the private sector to be part of the development in terms of the public-private partnerships, but it's really the government that has to put in place the right infrastructure that will be able to help in attracting the foreign direct investors. Now, there is also a second part for Nigeria that is very positive, in my opinion, and the fact that you are actually able to invest in other African countries. And as I said, especially in the financial services sector, as I said, I come from Kenya. In Kenya, in East Africa, in this case now, giving the example, you have a number of Nigerian banks that have already established. You have Access Bank, you have UBA. Now, I'm just trying to make sure I don't say EcoBank. I always thought EcoBank is a Nigerian bank until a few years ago when I was informed it was actually created to target the Nigerian market, but it's really a Togolese bank. But you can see that even other countries are targeting the Nigerian market. Look at South Africans. I just saw an advert of MTN just a few minutes ago. That means Nigeria is still a good market to invest in. Now, do we say everything is perfect? No. How do we improve? Part of what we are doing at the AFCFTA is also capacity building and awareness building. Now, when your government knows that it's now possible to get even more foreign exchange coming into the country because of the investments that are getting into the country, and also Nigerians who then have investment outside the country that can then repatriate some of their profits back into the country, then it becomes necessary that you have, you're not looking only inwards, but you're also looking outwards to the rest of the continent. So yes, one of the key things I would say is participate more in the implementation of the AFCFTA, which is harmonizing most of the key laws and regulations that will assist in the ease of doing business. Look at issues of airport, that's part of the infrastructure element that was raised earlier. Look at issues related to visa. I know, and I've had, I have a number of colleagues who are Nigerians, and I know Nigerians suffer also in terms of getting visas to get into other countries. But those are also issues that once we have the AFCFTA being implemented, then those are some of the issues that we can actually see how to streamline so as to avoid this problem of visas also for Nigerians getting into the rest of the continent, especially. So just those are just a few elements that I can think of, and I'll speak more on some of them as we look at the protocol or make comments on the protocol itself in a few minutes. Back to you.
Thank you, Emily. Ike, I'm going to come to you in a bit, but because of Jumoke having to leave shortly, Jumoke, I'd like you to comment on some of the feedback we've just received from Emily, and then also talk about some of the initiatives that you're working on this time to actually restore investor confidence.
Yeah, so I was a bit surprised about her not being able to get a visa. We have the 48-hour visa on arrival, so I would have gladly walked her through that process. It's one of the things, like Willology said, airports, access, those are basics for if you're trying to attract investors to your market, how they receive, working on customer relations, how the ports help relates to you, how the customs, the NDLEA, all the agencies, and we continue to work with them. That's domestically in the market, looking at how transparency and efficiency of public service delivery is carried out. Now, in terms of supporting Nigerian businesses to move out regionally and globally, I think that is where we really need to do a lot, because we keep talking about the FX supply challenges. It's not going to happen without increased productivity, which needs infrastructure, yes, but it also, I mean, Nigeria's infrastructure stock is low for us, but if we look at other African countries, we're not bad. If we look at our manufacturing cover as well. So taking advantage of what we have and sweating it appropriately by helping businesses scale regionally and plugging into international value chains. Now, one of the things that I would say I was surprised about that I didn't mention before was coming to the other side, private sector side, taking advantage of the reforms that have been implemented over the last 6 going on 7 years by the PEBEC, that's the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. So the EO1 talks about default approvals, talks about one government. There are quite a few things in there that the apathy, maybe it's a trust deficit, but I wish that more private sector would take it up. We've actually codified it in the Business Facilitation Act, which is a huge intervention with private sector, Section of Business Law, Nigerian Bar Association, and the NESG. So it's now a codified law, legally binding on Nigerian government, and I wish the private sector would put more of a push there. Just to say before I leave also, you know that for the last 6 years we've worked on our regulatory reform intervention, trying to use a lot of automation and process streamlining. We've worked on legislative and judicial interventions, things like the CAMA 2020 and the BFA 2022 I just mentioned, but also working with state judiciaries, making judgments electronically available at the Court of Appeal, and making small claims courts available across the country. So far, 13 states have instituted small claims courts, and 5 more in the pipeline, making 18, which takes us to the 50% threshold. But one of the most important interventions is our subnational ease of doing business effort with the National Economic Council and the NGF, because all states do their businesses domiciled all businesses have their actions domiciled in states. So cascading those business climate reforms, whether it's from fiber optics to land use to tax automation, all that. And that's what we've done, and consolidating and deepening that. But before I leave, I'd just like to talk about the new intervention that we would be starting soon. We'll be piloting it soon, and that has to do with scaling medium-sized enterprises. So of our nearly 40 million MSMEs in Nigeria, less than 2,000 of them are medium-sized enterprises, and we firmly believe that we need PEBEC business champions that we need to support with a concierge service to be able to make the environment more conducive for them. So we're setting up a transparent framework with clear criteria for selection for the pilot and then the cohorts over the next 3 years that we'll be running through, and just helping them with targeted troubleshooting, walking through the interventions required, and then escalating whatever else. So we've done this kind of work with pre-setup and setup of businesses, and the other parts of government like NIPC and other agencies that do similar work like NEPC as well. But we know that if we're going to scale, medium-sized businesses and large businesses, being more than 50% of Nigeria's GDP, need this support from the government to be able to cascade. They have an ecosystem of the smaller SMEs and clusters around them, working on our strategic priority areas, which we have. So it's quite a bit of information, and it's been empirically determined. But just to say that that's what we're going to be working on going forward, because we've seen that, yes, you can try to solve for everyone. You can't sort of eat an elephant with the business climate, so we have to have a more nuanced approach going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If we can just give a round of applause of thanking Jumoke for joining us. She has to depart. Thank you. I hope your event goes well. All right. Okay. So, Ike, it's interesting, this conversation, it's about FDI and investor confidence. But if you think about it, Emily spoke about Nigeria actually being a source of FDI to other countries. Jumoke was talking about and Willology mentioned the amount of capital that we actually have here. Mm-hmm. So is it that when we're just talking about FDIs, et cetera, are we missing a trick? Are we at risk of overlooking the capital that's available here and how best to tap into it?
Well, there's word for it, domestic direct investment, DDI, sort of foreign direct investment. There is certainly enough capital in Nigeria to tackle the investment problems we have. But it's the same problem that the local investors have, that the international investors have. And so all those challenges about how do you channel that energy into the economy is important. If I step back for a moment from sort of broadly speaking, what we haven't done well, we're supposed to be an oil-producing nation, and we've made an appalling job of that. That's the starting point. If we can actually take what we claim to be our distinctive competence and do a good job of that. In the oil sector, we recorded 0 FDI flows in the last quarter. For the whole of 2022, we recorded an amazing sum of $6.8 million. I say $million. So you can see how shambolic we have managed to distort that sector. So oil and gas and energy are so critical to driving the economy that we need to get that right. And so when we think about the Petroleum Industry Act that is there, what are the roadblocks towards actualizing that and kickstarting the flows from so many Nigerian companies that are already partners in that sector with international companies. So the internationals are waiting on the sidelines and saying, yes, I want to see you guys put your money down first. And what is stopping that from happening? So if you can then move away from oil and gas, one area that we've done quite well, like Bolaji mentioned, is telecommunications. But that is a pathway to the growth of the digital economy, and we have an amazing minister for digital economy already in place. But we need more investments in telecoms. You know, you try, a telecom company comes to a state and they hold them down with right of way to lay fiber optic cables. Can you imagine? You're providing them the lifeblood to grow their economy, and they've blocked every inch of progress. So again, how do we unravel that? It's all a local problem. And then the biggest one is transportation infrastructure. Again, we need all of that to be able to connect everything else, you know, from agriculture to mining to trade and investment. Without the transport infrastructure, it just won't happen. And in that context, you know, there's a report I saw, Nigeria will need in the near term at least $50 billion invested to just kickstart and hopefully attract the momentum to get it, the $1 trillion economy that the president spoke about this morning. It's all there, it's actually all within our grasp. But how do we collectively work together to pull these together, to get these things to start?
Thank you, Ike. So now we're down to 3 panelists. I am giving myself license to actually contribute to the conversation. So from time to time, I'll be a panelist, I'll be a moderator, just flow with me. So Ike, as you were talking, what came to my mind is, and I know somebody in the room will be smiling when I say it, it's about mindsets. I think actually the biggest challenge we have is ensuring we have the winning mindsets in the first instance, so people can join the dots between actions today and outcomes tomorrow. Because when you talk about the lack of investment in the oil sector, bottom line is, it's not a surprise.
It's not a surprise, yep.
When you talk about states not giving the right of way to fiber companies, I actually have one client, enough said, they need to join the dots between the decisions today not to facilitate, because if you look about it, you can look at FDI from a national standpoint, but you can also look at it from a state standpoint. So each individual state should be seeing themselves as the subnationals they are and thinking, I am competing with 35, 36 other jurisdictions competing for capital, and I need to ensure that I am as attractive as possible. And if capital is looking to come to me, I should not be putting hurdles. But again, I just love the way Bolaji keeps nodding, and that just tells me, Sonia, I've got something to say. Over to you, Bolaji.
No, I absolutely agree with you, and it didn't always used to be like that. And when I just think through to the launch of the telecoms industry in this country, the way that states behaved then and the way that states behave now, completely different. So in the first year of telecoms, I can remember at least 13, 14 states who were offering cell sites just to get telecoms into their states. So it's quite amazing that we've, turned around that paradigm where people understand the nexus between investment and development. And I think one of the other reasons is just the fact that we manage in the dark. And I'm going to speak about, what I mean by that. So every time you talk to an international investor, there's a term that's commonly used, but it now sort of has, connotations of racism. And it has nothing to do with racism. They talk about the dark continent. And it's a dark continent not because of the color of our skin. It's a dark continent because of the paucity of information. And if people don't have information, they have no ability to manage and to make good decisions. So I'm just going to talk about 3 simple principles. I slightly disagree. Nigeria is not an oil and gas economy. It's less than 15% of our GDP. There are three elements of this economy that are far more valuable. But because we have so little information about them, absolutely minimal investment is going into them. This country has the ability to feed not only this continent, but to feed the world. Nigeria has the ability to become one of the agricultural powerhouses of the world. And up until now, agricultural policy in Nigeria was mainly praying for rainfall. Not too much of it, or just enough of it to ensure that there is no farming. And to a large extent, if you were an agricultural investor today, it's not easy to find information about that sector. Our other valuable sector is Nigeria's solid minerals sector. And this country and the soil that you and I stand on today is so incredibly blessed that not only do we have all of the old metals, but we also have all of the EV metals that are critical to the energy transition and in commercial quantities. But you and I, again, there's a paucity of information about that. The final piece of this economy is really its incredible talent and creative economy, and I'll expand that. So it goes from people in the arts, in music and film, to people in technology, to people in sports, to all of the energetic, young people that you have in this country. But where is the data? Investors make decisions on information. Any investment case starts off with a business case. And the inputs of a business case, information and data. So in the same way that it's dangerous for our policymakers to be managing in the dark, it's equally unlikely that investments will come if we don't do a lot more to provide information.
Thank you. So, Emily, I'll come to you a little later. I just want to ask Ike a question, just leading from what Bolaji has said. If you think about it, right, you have some sectors that desperately need FDI.
Correct.
Then you have some sectors that are ready to receive FDI. And it's not a one-for-one mapping.
Right.
So just talk us through that. Which ones do you think desperately need it? Which ones do you think are ready for it? And how do we bridge that gap?
Ready for it? I'll probably start with, there are two questions. Who are the ones, which sectors need FDI and which ones are ready for FDI? I would start with the oil and gas sector, energy, they do need it. Certainly the ICT sector, agriculture, transport infrastructure. In terms of the ones that are most ready to receive it, probably the ICT sector is very ready. The oil and gas sector, you've got everything is set up, and that can also happen very quickly. In terms of the transport infrastructure, you already have the framework set up. Infracore is there. There's a Ministry of Finance incorporated. So transportation infrastructure can be readily addressed very quickly. So from the perspectives of the three sectors, I think that are most ready, ICT, oil and gas / energy, and infrastructure, particularly focusing on transport infrastructure. Then, of course, addressing the food issues we have, agriculture should really become a private sector-driven business. The government has the right policies in place, but I agree with Bolaji that we do have the capacity. We have not even scratched the surface in what we can do in agriculture. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Emily, are you there? Sorry, I'm just quite insecure when I don't see you. It's like, is she there? Is she not there? I don't know. So it wasn't lost on me that you kept talking about Nigeria. In fact, you were talking about the Jagba of capital. When you think about it, you were talking about capital moving out of Nigeria when we were trying to talk about capital moving in. And I know that there's some people's hesitancy regarding the AFCFTA is that they're concerned about resource outflow. Because right now, we're in a difficult situation, right? So what would you say to people who are concerned that, one, yes, we have a large, attractive market, but with this one African market, people can, FDI can flow into the neighboring countries, and they bring it into our market, which means we don't benefit from the FX flow, we don't benefit from the job creation, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And of course, that is something that enough of the countries suffer from when they start thinking regional integration. But the idea is that you are creating a bigger market. So it is how you will look at it positively that you have to already have created something internally to be able to take to the other market. Let me give the example of Dangote. If he does not have that larger market, he will not be able to employ even more Nigerians. So it is to look at it that you develop, yes, domestically, but then you look at how then can you move further into the larger market that has been established under the FCFTA. And of course, you can only do that also if you create, how do I say it, investor confidence in your own economy. And so you become the center, like when foreign direct investment is coming into the continent, if you are ready for the investors and they're confident of your economy, then you are able to be the country where they then establish to be able to get into the rest of the continent. You become a gateway, if I may use that word. And then even if we say not even to the complete continent, you're then able to be the gateway, let's say, to ECOWAS. You have, as I mentioned earlier, you have the workforce. But more of it, and maybe this is where the issue comes in, is how do you ensure that your financial services sector, and I was quite surprised when because I'm not hearing the financial services sector being mentioned a lot, while for us outside that are not Nigerians, that is one of your biggest export in terms of services. So how do you ensure that your services sectors domestically are so well established, and most of them, I can say they are, and then you get into the larger market. So instead of worrying about the integration or the now others getting the FDI, you can look at it from the point of view of establishing yourself in such a way that the FDI first comes to you, that is from outside the continent, and then you get it, or you then invest in the other African countries. And maybe I can actually mention there is a lot of work that we are doing with the Afreximbank. And of course, they are looking at how to support the different economies in the continent in terms of if we talk adjustment facility where you lose revenue as a government, then you're also able to get some compensation for that revenue for a period of time before then you can be able to get other sources of income. And as one of your former president, His Excellency Obasanjo says, you have to also move as Nigeria away from looking at agriculture as agro-processing and look at agriculture as a business. And when you look at agriculture as a business, as has been mentioned, then you're able to even attract your young population to get into agriculture. In the AFCFTA, we are also looking at a protocol or harmonizing laws and regulations as relates to digital trade. So we are looking at it from the point of view, how can you trade digitally? And there, and I'll mention again, Nigeria has comparative advantage. So you can actually make yourself the market for having digital trade in the continent, and you just you don't move most of your money out of your economy, but then you're able to trade with the rest of the continent as a larger market. So it's just how you look at it, and it's a mindset change, as you mentioned earlier, to ensure that we look at the AFCFTA more positively, that you're getting now a larger market to trade in than that your FDI is going to go to those other countries. With the Frexim Bank, we're looking at how do we develop and push forward what we are calling African direct investment. Instead of foreign direct investment, we now focus on African direct investment. How do you attract more companies from South Africa, from Egypt, from Morocco to come into Nigeria to develop and assist in some of the key areas and challenges that you have mentioned where they're doing better? So those are some of the key issues that we also need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We just have a few minutes for questions or comments from the floor. The lady with the green scarf, I don't know where the roving mics are. Gentlemen, I see you there. Can you keep it really brief, because they're going to throw us off the stage shortly, so if you don't mind. Mics, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Aisha Umar. Hi. My name is Aisha Umar, and I have a concern about, and it's a question. I'm beginning to become skeptical about FDI, having seen experience of Egypt, Morocco, how they've been able to bring in investment in infrastructure, but then the livelihoods, the people, the poverty of the people there. What do you think is going to happen to Nigeria if we bring all this fancy infrastructure and the foreign companies are able to, what's the word they use, repatriate? Mm-hmm. What's going to happen to Nigerians? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take 3 questions, and then that will be it.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah, my name is Moses Okezi Okafo, Director General Research and Development, Kogi State. And I think it was Dr. Jumoke who said, talking about fiber optics, he talked about right of way, and the other gentleman also talked about...
Sorry, just in the interest of time, if you just go straight
Yes, I'm going there. He also talked about how states used to volunteer cell sites in the past. That no longer happens. And when you talk about FDI, my question now is this. We're talking about ease of doing business and the so-called roadblocks that states place. How about the price of doing business with these guys for states and for their peoples? Because the land you take costs so much. You break farms, you break communities, they can't do anything there, and they don't get anything back. Most of the times you pay your taxes to the federal government, and when states insist that you should even pay the municipal rates that their citizens pay for land and for the use of it, you claim that you have other agreements that forfeit that. And at the end of the day, no, just a moment, the states get nothing. And then you complain when they insist that even when the courts rule that you should pay, you say you will not pay. So my question is ease of doing business. What about the price of you doing business for states and their peoples? Thank you very much.
Thank you. One last question from Ms. Willology. Yeah, thank you. If the mic can go there, please. Whilst the mic is going, actually, I see a recurring theme between the first 2 questions. One is, as capital is coming to the country, what's the impact on Nigerians? And when capital is going to the state, the impact. So it's really the same question. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Willology. My question is about electricity generation. You were talking about which sectors are ready for FDIs. And although you mentioned the oil, gas, and energy, I actually felt that electricity generation, electricity should be separate, especially now that the states are allowed to have their own electricity and generation. So my question is, how do you, what steps will states take to attract FDIs for electricity generation in their state? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to get you, Bolaji, you'll take the first couple of questions because they're related as part of your close.
Okay.
Ike, you'll take the last question as part of your close. And Emily, I'll come to you last for a close.
Okay.
No more than a couple of minutes.
Sure. So I'll just speak to this issue about FDI and infrastructure. I think all of the countries that have built any significant infrastructure since the end of World War II, infrastructure has always been developed primarily in local currency. And when you think about what that means that the country's private sector has been involved with the government because governments do not have the wallet or the ability to develop infrastructure on their own. You will see some foreign investor participation in infrastructure, but by and large, the foundations of accelerating infrastructure have to be a local currency business. And I don't think in that sense that you're focused, you should be worried about repatriation of capital and so on. And when you have no infrastructure, all the infrastructure that you build must be infrastructure that works for the people. So it's infrastructure that connects markets and farming communities, to cities, to airports, to towns. It's infrastructure that connects mining communities to shipping ports. It's all of those things that are really, really fundamental for lifting the people out of poverty. At the end of the day, who you invest in infrastructure for is the people.
Thank you. Ike?
Thank you. On the question of states developing electricity markets for themselves in light of the new act, I think that if you really step back for a moment and think about the Nigerian electricity industry, on the generation side, we actually have quite a lot of unutilized capacity. We have about 17,000 megawatts of power available. But on the distribution side, because of the transmission infrastructure, we're only getting about 4,000 megawatts distributed. So the starting point for states is not to go and build new power plants. That would be a waste of money. It's how to attract those power plants to wheel that power back to those states. And you have to start thinking about price reflective tariffs. It's no point hoping that you're going to get the electricity at something below the market. But if your state is willing to build sort of business parks, concentrate power in some areas, you can find quite a number of GENCOs that will work with you if you sign the right PPA that is cost reflective. We're happy to help you advise on that. Then you can actually have that power directed to your state. And that's a starting point. Because if you're not fortunate to be in a state that has gas, even if you had the gas, there's no point trying to build all the gas processing systems and the power generating power plants around it when you can already use electricity coming out of an existing power plant. So that's the starting point. In terms of my closing remark, I think when you think of attracting FDI and DDI, domestic direct investment, we have to deal with that elephant in the room. How do we tame price and FX instability? I think that is at the back of the mind of any serious business person here, because the inflation is running away, the exchange rates, I look by the minute, I'm getting poorer. It's very heartbreaking. But we got some assurances this morning, and I hope that the speed at which those measures can be rolled out to be quite rapid so that we can have a more stable economy to deal with. And then beyond that, insecurity. Without having a more secure environment that allows each and every one of us to get in a car and drive from here to Lokoja and continue to Port Harcourt, then we're not yet ready. I recall when I moved back to Nigeria in 2003, my wife and I and our daughter would drive from here and go to Obudu Cattle Ranch, spend a week and drive back. today such a journey would be almost regarded as clueless and mad. And that's the problem we have.
Thank you, Ike. Emily, can we have your brief closing remarks? Emily? Emily, last call? Okay, all right, maybe this, you see why I was paranoid whenever I didn't see her. So thank you. Please, a round of applause for our panelists as I, thank you. So if I'm going to summarize, what I've taken from this is perspective is everything. Instead of looking at Nigeria and the risk that, capital will flow out or what we need won't come in, it's just to look at the bigger picture.
I'm not able to hear from the room.
We've got a larger market.
Am I missing something?
Yes, Africa is not a country, but Africa could be one much larger market. We need the data, because if you're going to, Emily, there you are. Okay, I'll pause. We can't hear you, though. Can you?
Hello, I can't hear the room at all. I don't know whether you can hear me from the room, but I can't hear anything from the room.
We seem to have lost you. You're frozen. We're frozen, so we'll leave it. So we're talking about data and the importance of data to be able to actually make quality decisions, looking at sectors such as agri, not just from a sustenance standpoint, but actually the opportunities. We're always talking about, the challenges in Nigeria being opportunities, but we actually need to take the steps to realize those opportunities. One thing that was not lost on me was we kept saying that we required infrastructure to attract the FDI, but you and I know that we actually need the capital to build the infrastructure. So the only way I was looking at that is almost like there's a dance that we need to do, where you build a bit of infrastructure, get some FDI, and it's just a dance. But to summarize everything, we as a nation need to take all the necessary steps to make ourselves as beautiful a bride as possible, because as I said, there is competition for capital. Thank you very much.
Thank you.